Welcome back on Lehocky Postgame Show. My name's Mark Farzetta. That's Bill Colarulo. And right there, ladies and gentlemen, you know you love him from the National Football Show right here on JAKIB Media. Dan Sileo.
You asked for it, I bring it. There it is, Jerome Brown. You asked for it, there it is.
I think, hey, look, I'm all for, piping hot takes, but when I look down in the chat and I see Jerome Brown after we mentioned Jalen Carter, I just want to be like,
Mark, I'll tell you this, though. I mean, coming out of college, when people go like this about Carter, great feet, great hands, moves well, he's got all the things that Jerome had when I played next to him. And you saw now going into the NFL, was he going to be that player? Obviously, that's the big question. But I think that kid's got all the skill set to be that kind of player. And I've said that since draft day that, to me, I thought he was the best player in the draft. And if he didn't have those unfortunate circumstances, I think that guy would have been, probably because the quarterback is probably the premium position. Still, for me, he would have been a top 3.
Yeah, Sil, what's up, man? It's Bill Colarulo, by the way.
Good,
I'm not
man.
sure we ever met. Do you remember a rookie getting this much praise from the veteran guys on the team? Usually they try to keep these guys down. It's amazing.
That, to me, I'll tell you, that's the culture that is in the building, though, too. You got Slay talking about Devontae Smith. You have Fletcher Cox talking about Jalen Carter. You have all those guys that are trying to pass the baton and letting these younger players know what the level of play is in the building. Those guys have all risen through the ranks because other guys were giving them the praise as they were coming along. And it's a passing of the baton. So to me, that's why that culture, the reason that the Eagles win big games is because of exactly what you're hearing in the offseason. Man, this guy here, Devontae Smith's going to be the number one. He's going to be the best player there is. And in Dallas, you got an owner opening his fat face. You got him and everyone talking about expectations, and you're talking again about Dallas. My God almighty. Insanity's talking about the same crap every year. I feel like I'm going to have my head explode every time I hear someone go, the Cowboys are Super Bowl contenders. You're like, why? You haven't won a meaningful game in 30 years. I mean, seriously, you were still on MySpace.
Because they love ratings. That's what it is. They hype up the Cowboys.
Mark, that's it. Mark, that's
it.
It's here's the two things you do with Eagle and Cowboy. You infuriate Eagle fans and you overhype Cowboy fans, and that's what networks like to do.
Oh, it's the nectar of the gods to them, to just either piss us off as Philadelphia fans or just hype up the Cowboys. You know what? When they hype them up, it only makes their downfall so much more enjoyable.
Oh, hey, watching the Cowboys sit around and be the Kardashians of the NFL is hilarious. I mean, they're totally the Kardashians. I mean, look, we're sitting here doing a post-game show, but I would like to do a post-mortem because that thing, like you said, Bill, I mean, I wanted to go wash my car in the second quarter because we're sitting there. That was the Trey Sermon game. And trying to figure out if you're going to carry more O linemen, more D linemen, linebackers, or maybe more secondary guys. It was all about the Eagles are in a dude. 99% of that roster was set going into that thing tonight, and they're looking for one or two dudes. And Trey Sermon was on display, and unfortunately, he didn't do anything to keep himself in the graces to keep a job. I do not believe that guy makes the roster. Maybe he's a guy that's going to go on the practice squad because they like him. I mean, the Eagles like this kid. They wanted him. They look at the opportunity they gave him in the fourth quarter here. So for me, I mean, it was about him. Some of the secondary guys, Ricks, okay. You looked at some of the offensive linemen, Tanner McKee. I mean, they were just happy that, in my opinion, Marcus Mariota had a good moment. And as soon as that good moment happened, they got his ass out of there because they want him going into the regular season feeling pretty good about it. And so did they. They pulled him early because they wanted to feel better about themselves, not about Marcus Mariota.
Dan, who do you think is going to be the other starting safety on this team? Obviously, Blankenship's got the one spot locked up, but they dress every other safety. Who do you think's got that spot?
I'll tell you something, because Marcus is Paisan, and I love the way he has his attitude and the way he has energy and the way he came out of the gate, Bill, when it came to Sidney Brown in game one. I was that way too. But see, this kid here, man, he's got to learn to play in the sandbox. And what I mean by that is, man, I don't want to have to pull him to the edge. I want to pull him off the edge. But you got to play with controlled being crazy and controlled being a psycho out there. He gores people right now, which means this: he's not a very good form tackler. And this kind of plagued him compared to Devin Weatherspoon, who's the other guy that was the highly touted guy in the secondary at Illinois. And I talked to Lovie Smith about it. You know, he likes to gore you. What happens when you're in the NFL and you hit a guy? And what I mean by gore, you're trying to just throw your body into a guy. If you don't wrap up, in my opinion, in this league, you're not getting a guy down when you're just going into him and slamming into him. You're doing that in the Big Ten. You're not doing that in the NFC East. You've got to have form tackles. You've got to get these guys on the ground. And to me, I like him against New England. I would think about starting him because I can't see Mac Jones throwing the ball 40 times in that game. I think they're going to run the ball 40 times to try to test that defensive tackle and that triangle out. So I don't know. I mean, but he's playing with his hair on fire, and he's got to kind of calm down a little bit. But I like him. I'm with you, Mark. I like the kid. I think the kid's got a chance to be a bigger version of Bob Sanders.
Wow. I know our friend Derek Gunn has a similar opinion to you, like Bob Sanders and Sidney Brown and what he could be in this league. Dan, I do want to ask you about the other position that we were also kicking around here, and that's the linebacker position. You did not see Zach Cunningham tonight. You did not see Nakobe Dean tonight, so obviously it looks like those guys are going to be your starting two linebackers, and that's the way the Eagles like to roll. What do you think are fair expectations? I'll start with just Nakobe Dean. What do you think are fair expectations of Nakobe Dean going into what should be his first year as a starting middle linebacker?
I'm exceptionally concerned. I mean, I think the guy who did the dirty work and the guy who's the most underrated player on last year's team was TJ Edwards. 160 tackles, 100 solo. Do you truly believe that a kid who hasn't played in 2 years, limited 34 snaps, is going to go in there and give you 150 tackles? I don't believe it. I mean, I'm not even talking about his ability here. I'm talking about the responsibility here. I mean, when TJ was put in 2 years ago, overnight he changed the run defense and helped the run defense. You're talking about a guy who gave you 290 tackles in 2 years. You're replacing that with a guy who you're not sure can handle all that. Even when Seth Joyner was added to Gang Green, they played him at the Sam. Then they dropped him over at the Will. Then they moved him into the Mike. You're asking him to sit there and make calls for the defense and fits and slide defensive linemen, echo back to the secondary, and you're asking him to do all that and give you 160 tackles? Boy, I'll tell you what. And you're going against Belichick, the better coach football team than the Eagles on Monday. They have the better team. There's no doubt. But the coaching staff, in my opinion, in New England is better. You got the greatest D coordinator in the history of the league. You got a guy in Bill O'Brien who coached Mac Jones at Alabama and won 2 Super Bowls with Brady. I mean, they're going to be well prepared. So to me, I mean, boy, they're going to go right after, in my opinion, New England's going to run the ball, and they're going to attack the secondary, the safety position, and they're going to attack Nakobe Dean. I feel better with you, Mark. I feel better that Zach Cunningham is the other guy. But to me, Cunningham or somebody should have been the Mike, and you put Nakobe Dean. Like, I would have felt great with this. TJ Edwards and having Nakobe Dean at a Sam backer. To me, you're making the transition better. Give him a chance to play. Right now, all we have is hope. And so that's why I'm not talking. I haven't said one word whether he can play or not. I'm just talking about what he has to do.
Yeah, I agree with you, Dan. I've been concerned as well. But this Eagles team, it seems like they made the decision as soon as the season ended last year that Dean was going to be their guy. So they must be really high and confident
Okay, then, Bill,
he's
I'll
ready.
tell you. I'll ask you this then, Bill. Okay, then I want to know why you're so confident. Show
I'm
me
not.
why.
They are.
Show me. No, not you, Bill. I want
Yeah.
to know why the Eagles. Show me why the Eagles are so confident then. And get this. Hey, all that talk is great. We're married to this now. This thing happens next week. So all the opinions you have or I have or whatever, we're going to tee it up next week against, or 2 weeks against New England, and we're going to find out if this guy can run the triangle. What I mean by that is the 2 DTs in front of him and him behind those 2 DTs. Because I saw them against the Browns. I saw the second and third team Brown team knock them off the ball in that last exhibition game. You get a punch out to save a touchdown. I went like this. Okay, well, the first quarter, the Browns and their second and third team O-line had 100 yards on offense and 32 plays, and the Eagles had 11 plays and 28 yards. I don't know, man. I'm going to be very interested in to see why everyone is so comfortable at the NovaCare Center.
As someone who is confident in Nakobe Dean, and I understand, and look, I am not downplaying TJ Edwards in the least. He was, I liked what you had to say about himself. He was very undervalued, very underappreciated, very underrated for the plays he was able to make. But speed wasn't necessarily his thing. Quickness wasn't necessarily his thing. But he could run downhill and make, or coverage, exactly. I think Nakobe Dean can excel at those points. And I think his instincts will be overall better, and his ability to recognize a play will be overall better. Will it translate to 160 tackles? That I'm not so sure about. But maybe it translates to a couple more sacks. Maybe it translates to a couple more pass breakups. And what I do remind people is, as good as TJ Edwards was, you still had a guy like Alex Singleton before that who was leading the team in tackles and actually one of the top in the NFL at tackles. So I think Nakobe Dean will at least be better than that. Whether or not he'll be better than TJ Edwards in his first attempt to be better than TJ Edwards and be a legitimate linebacker, middle linebacker in the NFL, that will remain to be seen. But I think it's not going to be as much of a drop-off from TJ Edwards to Nakobe Dean based on the instincts, the smarts, and the quickness that you didn't necessarily have from TJ Edwards.
So you're taking that from his college days, though, right, Mark? Because you're not taking it from his pro days.
Oh, I can't. This is what we do when we predict what a rookie or young player can do, of course.
Right, and nor can I. That's why I'm saying you're asking a lot of responsibility to not even let the kid get out and play first. I mean, here's the one thing you do as a pro when you get into the NFL, and it's so obnoxious because you don't know what you're doing. You play from behind. You look like you have a slow step because you're thinking so much out there. And before you know it, you're slipped and scooped and reached. And you're looking around going, holy shit, I just got 5 minuses. Are you kidding me? I'm looking around. I'm talking to my line. Because you're thinking so much. Am I properly lined up in a 3, a 2? Hey, am I lined up? Did I line up? Hot. And you have so much, and these plays come rapid fire like that. So again, I hear what you're saying, and again, and look, I think the kid showed a lot in college. Okay, that's great. But now you're in the big boy league and playing in the SEC East versus the NFC East. I want to see that translate in there. I'm not a wishful thinker guy. I'm a dude that looks at somebody on who you are right now. And all I know that Nakobe Dean, he's got 34 snaps. I don't know anything about him. And now he's got the green dot. We're going to find out against New England. And that's the worst team in the East, AFC. So, it's going to be a great test. I think they win. And, if they put them away early, it's a long night for New England. New England wants to make that thing a fourth quarter football game, in my opinion. Get it into the fourth, and they'll take their shot like they did against Brady a couple of years ago when he went up there. But they're going to go after Dean.
Let's stay with the linebacker position. So obviously Dean's a lock to make the team. He's going to be your starting linebacker.
And starter.
Yeah. Ellis is probably a lock because of his special teams ability. And now you have Zach Cunningham as the other starter. Who do you think the fourth linebacker is going to be? Is it Morrow, or is it going to be this rookie Van Simmeren?
Boy, Morrow was on the worst tackling football team in the NFL, and people keep throwing me 100 tackles. So he had 100 tackles on the 31st worst run defense in the league, which means this: he was chasing. He's a solid dude, and I would probably keep both because you know why? the crappy special teams the Eagles have.
Yeah.
They need bodies over there. That unit was the worst cover team in the league. That thing was terrible, and it reared its head in the Super Bowl. You can't beat – hey, you can beat the Texans and some of those teams they played last year. You're not beating the Bills with crappy special teams and giving up half fields. You're not doing that on a consistent basis. So I would think that you're looking at safety and linebacker on keeping more bodies because, they didn't address anything in special teams. And that was a factor in the biggest game of the year. They didn't do anything to address it. So, I mean, who makes – I mean, let's look at this too. PFF, Pro Football Focus, had the Eagles as the third worst tackling team in the league last year. Okay. You lose 5 of your top 6 tacklers. And now you're not as big and you have less experience. Whew, man, who stays at linebacker when you're talking about spare parts? I mean, think about it, Bill. You're talking to me about guys they just grabbed off the street. I mean,
one of them's going to be your starter. You got him 11 days ago.
Listen, here's where I give Howie the credit, though. Last year, he plugged them holes, and everybody had a career year. I mean, I tell you, I've never seen more people added, Mark, to a roster and to a team where everyone came in. A.J. Brown had a career year. Kaiser White had a career year. I mean, C.J. Gardner-Johnson had a career year. You brought all these Hassan Reddick had a career year. I think his genius is looking at rosters with guys like Gardner-Johnson. What was it? August 30th, they got his ass before they even started the regular season, right?
As a nickel.
And because they paid Honey Badger all that money, Mickey Loomis goes like this. Hey, go ahead, have him. He's making $825,000 a year, and that guy leads the NFL in interceptions. He makes $8 million now. Everyone got a raise last year that Howie brought in. So I'm giving that guy the benefit of this, that he knows what he's looking at on what he can fix and what he can use, I think, on this roster to plug some of these holes. I'll give you this in this offseason. I think this offseason is better than what he did a year ago because I think what he did this year, I think he limited the damage of the losses that they had with all those top flight players like Hargrave and them dudes like, hey, Epps had 91 tackles. Kaiser White had 117. I mean, you're talking about a boatload of dudes that had career years, and he found all them dudes.
Last thing for me, before we let you go, who has a better chance to be on the Eagles in the upcoming season? Is it Ian Book or Jonathan Taylor?
Who's Ian Book?
Exactly.
Oh, wait, he's at Notre Dame. You'll have to excuse me, Bill. I'm a Miami Hurricane. So Notre Dame and Big Sills and convicts and Catholics, I think that guy's a Notre Dame guy.
Yes.
So as far as I'm concerned, that guy's I'm going to have to call the Rock and tell him, hey, Rock, man, the Eagles have a guy they're blowing out here in a minute. And Jonathan Taylor has a better chance of being on the Eagles than Ian Book.
Okay. That's what I thought you'd say. Okay, just making sure. That gives us hope.
I had to stay honest to you here on Notre Dame.
Absolutely. Sills, great catching up with you, man. Thank you so much.
You.
Of course, everyone, you're already watching, of course, the National Football Show with Dan Sileo right here on the JAKIB Media YouTube channel and the JAKIB Media family. Dan, great interview and great to talk to you. Appreciate your insight, man. Talk to you soon.
You bet. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. The great Big Sills, Dan Sileo, joining us here on the Pond Lehocky Postgame Show, brought to you by the great people of Oceans Casino. We'll be back in a minute, and we'll speak to our friend Kayla Santiago about all things birds. She'll join us on the show later on. John McMullen will be joining us. Let us know what Nick Sirianni had to say about this preseason finale against the Colts. We'll be back on the JAKIB